Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Tim O'Brien. He's going to share some stories about the time he spent touring with Mark Knopfler.
One year at the Philly Folk Festival, somebody told me I should check out this group, the Battlefield Band. Their fiddler, they said their fiddler's just like 19, but he's really good. He just plays just the right thing. Fiddle player's name was John McCusker. We were talking. I just was, so you play, I said, I really like your fiddle playing. And he said, do you play? I said, yeah, I work at it, you know. He says, just keep working at it. You know, he says, just got to keep doing it. It'll come. I said, thanks. And about a half hour later, I'm up on stage and he goes, oh, you asshole. You know, I'm playing fiddle. Anyway, so we got to be fast friends. And then, you know, one thing leads to another. Pretty soon, John's hired to be a sideman for Mark Knopfler. And I saw the show at the Ryman. I got to meet Mark after the show. And a couple of years later, Mark was getting ready to do a world tour. You know, he's going to tour U.S. and Europe. And John, his wife, was going to have a baby, their first baby. So he wanted to get a sub for the 5 weeks in the U.S. So they called me. When I saw that show at the Ryman, I thought, I love Mark Knopfler, but I don't know why he has all these other instruments there. I would just like to hear him play the guitar and sing. And, you know, it's kind of like I couldn't even hear the vocals, even though I knew the songs. I thought, that's kind of funny, but I guess that's what it is. And then when they called, I was convinced to give it a whirl. And it was really good pay. And I thought, well, this is a way to check this out. Certainly touring in another style was one of the things that was interesting. But really what was interesting was that Mark it became very clear during rehearsals that he heard everything and really wanted this texture. He really wanted to manipulate these sounds that he had added to the band. It was really important to him to express what he wanted to express. And what was interesting about Mark's guitar rig was he had these big Marshall stacks behind him. I think a couple big old speaker cabinets, at least one big one. But they were dummy cabinets. They had like a twin, like a pro, or what I guess a deluxe, a really nice deluxe reverb, and maybe something smaller, a Princeton, maybe a small Marshall in there. There's probably two cabinets and had different amps in each one. But he had this guy Glenn, who was his guitar tech. Glenn would be behind that. He'd kind of sneak up in the dark behind there and adjust the amps and adjust the input so that he was going through the right one for the right sound. I mean, talk about being particular about everything. He had this nailed, but it was disguised. One time, Mark's young daughter came up to him after a show and said, Daddy, there's a man that comes up behind you on the stage and messes with your amplifier. I don't know if you know that. It was meant to be, on the sly. But I'll tell you, it was funny. I heard on one of the songs that he sent for me to bone up on ahead of the tour, I thought I heard a banjo, like a clawhammer banjo. So I wrote to him in an email. I said, what about banjo? I thought I heard banjo on this track. He said, no, that's not a banjo, but he said, bring it along. So tried banjo on several songs, and I ended up playing it on several things. He had a lot of songs that would start out, like I said, they start out like an acoustic folk song, you know, like one of these songs that would go from G to F, you know, and it would be like a Ralph Stanley kind of a sound, playing the banjo against it. He really liked that. And there was one song, Telegraph Road or something. I can't remember what it was called. It's about stock car racing. His songs are about, you know, the woman. His songs about the guy that started McDonald's, or, you know, guys that retire old big sea-going, you know, cargo ships and how they run them into the ground. Funny topics. This one's about stock car racing. Starts out real quiet, and I'm playing the clawhammer banjo, and he's playing some kind of acoustic guitar. At one point in the song, off to my left, Roger Bennett has left the stage with his acoustic bouzouki or something and comes back with a Les Paul, and he goes, you know, and I'm going tinky, tinky, tink, tink. And then pretty soon Mark's on my right and he's got the Les Paul and the two of them are going at it and I'm going tinky, 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 tink. And I go, okay, this is my gig and I love it. When we started playing with him, you know, from the very first show, you realize everyone knows all the words to all these songs. He just maybe consciously uses the mix. They know what song it is. They know the words. They turn up the other stuff so you hear that more. He just likes it that way. And he can also do more. Crocker, his manager, says, you know, he does 6 nights on and 1 night off. A lot of singers can't do that many, but he doesn't really sing that hard. He just kind of mumbles, you know, so he doesn't wear his voice out. So it's kind of maybe a combination of things. He just doesn't really care. It doesn't matter if they hear it. They're singing along anyway. What's funny, you know, I knew he was great. You know, I knew some of the Dire Straits things, and I knew the songs were great and unusual. I knew the topics were sometimes unusual. You know, the Money for Nothing is about guys moving boxes around, and you know, Sultans of Swing is about another band. It's kind of a funny pop hit. You find out that he's over and over he's written these great songs about these unusual subjects, and you know, you work with Steve Earle or Mark Knopfler, really quickly, even if you weren't aware of their music, you get aware of it quickly because you have to know it inside and out yourself. The only way to get deeper into somebody's music is to sing it yourself and internalize it. You just realize how good the guy is. So then you're seeing that everybody knows all the words to him, and you realize that you're just helping him and the audience celebrate this. It's a good lesson because, you know, your ego kind of goes out the window because you're just serving the greater good. It's obviously a good thing. You know, my buddy Charles Sawtelle that I played with in Hot Rise, he often said, you know, if you see somebody that's really famous for their music, you might not like it, you might not have cared about it or whatever, but you see them, and if you actually listen to what they do, you'll find that they are very talented and they do a certain thing that's really valuable. They're really good at what they do. And that's like in spades, you know, when you get in a situation like Mark Knopfler's band, you just realize, God, the guy's really got a lot on the stick. And the anthems, it's the power of, you realize that songs have a lot of power. His approach is really kind of understated. And it's sort of disarming that way. Something like John Prine or somebody. It's just like great songs, and people. He's one of those who their reputation really is based on what they. It's no hype to it. It's just the real thing, and there's a real incredible value there. People love, you know, people want the stories. They don't sit around campfires and kind of collaborate on, you know. Tell the family stories as much as they used to. We need singers and songwriters and movies and stuff now and books. It's kind of serve some of the same function, but doing it in a group, you know, getting a large group together, there's a certain surge of collective emotion kind of going on there. These big concerts, and I found it really joyous to be the, you know, little sideman on that thing. It was. My manager saw the show in New York, and we played at the church that was Reverend Ike's church. Or it was a theater that was Reverend Ike's church there in New York City. The staff was so nice; they were still kind of part of that religious organization. But he said, "You're having entirely too much fun on this gig. I've never seen you smile like that." So many of the songs were the arrangements would start really quietly in an acoustic form. And he might play acoustic guitar or steel-bodied guitar. And then at some point he would shift to a Stratocaster or a Les Paul or something and start really rocking out. We had 3 weeks, 6 days a week of rehearsals in London. I mean, that in itself is really highly unusual. Usually I'd have a rehearsal for 1 day and then go on tour, maybe a day. he was rehearsing, not just rehearsing the music, but he's rehearsing the sound and the lights, and these digital programmed monitors, mixers. There's 8 different monitor mixes on stage, and they're programmed to change throughout the song as things change. It's insane. And the precision and the lighting, working on the lighting of that. And then in the second 2.5 weeks in, or 2 weeks in, you start working on clusters of songs, see how they flow from one to another. Your parts in a larger group like that, which I'm not used to, it becomes very much a traffic direction thing. You don't want too much going on. You want to call attention to certain things, so everything has to set a certain place so that it sets the right thing off, in front. But this is what Mark was into. And, you would think that that's very restrictive, because in a 4-piece group, you got a lot of room to move. And if I like playing as a solo, you can just do whatever you want. But I learned that there is wiggle room. There is room for expression within those small confines of your role. It was really an interesting learning experience, and one that I try to take to heart now, because in more recent years, I like just to play rhythm and sing and just be the director of the band more than playing a lot of solos or anything like that. And that was a really good lesson working with Mark, because he really listened to everything closely. I mean, you couldn't, maybe after the first couple of shows, we would meet afterwards and talk about how it went, that's the same evening. And that would be good. He would explain things. And then the next day, you might be at the sound check, and he'd go up to the light guy and go, hey, by the way, when this thing happens, don't shine the lights over there. It's happening right over here during this part of this. And they would rehearse that. He knew it and didn't want it to happen again, And then, so it commands an awful lot of respect. Whatever you play, he's going to hear it. He's got it in his ear monitors, and he's going to hear it. I'll tell you a good one on him, though. We were doing this song on the tour, Mason and Dixon, and it was a duet. On the recording he made was a duet between James Taylor and himself, and they were singing the voices of Mason and Dixon, who surveyed the line that divides the North and the South. So I'm going to sing the James Taylor part. So rehearsed it, got it through. We played the first gig. It was in Seattle. The next night we played in Vancouver, BC. We would play the show and fly after the gig in the private jet to someplace else. Like, you might do 3 shows from the same hotel and fly up and back. Kind of crazy, the high style of it. So anyway, by the time I'd get back to my room after a flight, after a gig, and my suitcase would be delivered to my room already. And this is at a time when, on my own gig, I'd still be counting out the merch money, I still wouldn't have even packed up my guitar yet. The backstage, there was all, killer backstage food, but there's all this wine, tons of really nice wines, and, buckets full of beer. But I noticed no one was, well, there's 2 subs for John McCusker. They had 2 guys. And because I didn't play penny whistles, so they get Mike McGoldrick, who's another old friend from UK, plays the pipes and the flutes and the whistles and guitars and stuff. So 2 of us were kind of the new guys, and I said, Mike, you notice nobody's drinking any of this wine. We got all this great food, and there's this really nice wine, and nobody's drinking it. And what do you think? Is it off limits, or why is it there? So I asked the tour manager. They had 2 tour managers. They had one that dealt with the band, and one that dealt with the money. And then they had the actual manager. So I said to the tour manager for the band, I said, is there a policy on the wine? Because, it's like, I've got a steak here. I think a little glass of wine might be nice. He said, oh, yeah, help yourself. I said, well, I noticed no one else is drinking it. He said, well, that's, maybe they just want to stay sharp for the show. I said, oh, okay, well, I won't drink the wine. He says, no, you can drink it if you want. So, weird. So I asked the other road manager. He said, well, you can have some wine if you want. And I said, well, nobody else is. Well, maybe they're just trying to stay straight. I said, okay, fine. I said, well, maybe I should ask Mark. He said, oh no, don't ask Mark. he doesn't like confrontation. I said, okay, I won't ask Mark. So this is really like 15 minutes later. Me and Mike McGoldrick are in the dressing room, and Mark comes in. He says, oh, how you guys doing? No, it looks like they got a nice bit of food. He says, oh, by the way, if you guys want any drink of wine, help yourself. I used to. So we're looking at each other going, okay, all right. So we have a glass of wine. So this is the third night of the gig, third night of the tour, and time came for the Mason and Dixon song, and I screwed up the lyrics. So I'm going, oh, shoot, man, Mike, I screwed it all up, man. I guess I shouldn't have a glass of wine. And, by that time I realized there is a difference. Maybe there really is a difference between one glass of wine and no glass of wine, which usually to me is kind of negligible. That night, we've taken our flight back, and McGoldrick and I are walking to our room down the hallway. And I said to Mike, I said, had that one glass of wine and I had to fuck up the goddamn song, proving the point of maybe I shouldn't have wine. And unbeknownst to us, Mark's about 10 steps behind us. He goes, hey, man, don't worry about it at all. So I don't know what the answer is, but it was a great tour.